Guys, welcome back. I'm top music attorney Miss Crystal, and I have been watching this Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. We're now just crossing the 2-week threshold, and tomorrow Johnny's still on the stand. So we've seen about a day and a half of cross-examination worth of testimony and examination, and it has been, I don't know about you guys, but I've just been glued to the TV since this trial started. Now, something interesting that's been happening over the last couple of days is that this TikTok that was posted by the cosmetic company that makes the palette that Amber Heard's second attorney had talked about in the opening statement, this cosmetic company had posted, and I'm going to turn down my audio. I'm getting a note that's a little loud. All right, let me know how that sounds, guys. So Amber Heard's attorney had been holding this compact in her opening statement. She said, "You will hear testimony from Amber talking about the fact that this is the compact that she used, right? This is the exact product that she used when she was married and with Johnny Depp to hide her bruises and to hide them at the different stages." And so this cosmetic company posted a TikTok that is almost at 1 million likes. I think it's had like 6 million views, basically addressing this statement and kind of calling Amber Heard a liar. So we're going to watch the clip from the opening statement so we can just have that reference. I don't know if you guys have been watching this as much as I have, but we will be sure to watch that clip. And then we're going to check out the TikTok from the cosmetic company. And then I figured, we're doing this as a live stream. I'm going to see your comments coming in. I already see you guys checking in. Hi, hi, hi. And so we're going to have a conversation about it, but I want to recap and I'm going to give you guys a rundown of what we have heard to date. And so we can kind of get up to speed. And then if you are watching this trial tomorrow, we will see Johnny Depp again back on the stand in that cross examination. So let's just check in. Hello, hello. I see a lot of you in the comments. Thank you for subscribing. Beautiful. So look, let's just jump right into it. I'm going to pull up the first clip, which is on Court TV Live. Now, I don't know where you guys are watching, but I kind of watched the first couple of days through Court TV. They have a lot of breaks and commercials, so I kind of ended up getting a little annoyed. And I went and was watching it on a live stream through ABC News, but you can also watch it on Sky News, on YouTube. So there's a lot of different places. But this clip that we're watching was posted on Court TV. All right, here we go. I'm going to pull this in. I'm taking this off the screen. All right, here we go. And guys, let me know if you have any trouble hearing this, but this is Amber Heard's attorney. She had 2 attorneys. This was the second half. We're going to talk about these opening statements, and we're going to talk about from, my perspective, what was effective in the arguments, which attorneys did better, which side kind of came off a little bit better. But this is the second attorney for Amber Heard, and we're going to listen to what she has to say.
Somebody called TMZ to take all those photos that day. Now, you also heard them say that all kinds of people saw Amber that week, and she didn't have any bruises on her face. Well, let me show you this. This is what Amber carried in her purse for the entire relationship.
All right, so we're seeing the makeup palette.
She's an actor. Do you honestly think she would have left her apartment ever without makeup? Do you think?
Now, look, guys, we can't see it quite as well as the jury can at this point, but this looks like a brand new palette. And I just want to point that out because in this opening statement, the attorney is saying this is the palette that she used, right? So it's not. It doesn't look to be anything other than a brand new palette. So I thought that was notable. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. Here we go. Let's keep going.
Think that she ever would have wanted other people to see her bruises and her cuts? This was what she used. She became very adept at it. And you're going to hear the testimony from Amber about how she had to mix the different colors for the different days of the bruises.
You're going to hear testimony from Amber herself about this palette and the different colors that she had to use and mix for the different days of bruising that she was experiencing, okay? Those are the words that the attorney is very clearly articulating in this opening statement.
as they developed in the different coloring and how she would use these to touch those up to be able to cover those. She also used concealed foundation. You'll hear from her makeup person that Amber didn't even leave her bedroom without having foundation on. And one of the people that was at the building testified. He said she had makeup on and it would have covered that bruise. So that's the testimony on that.
Okay, so if you're gonna use actual a piece of evidence that you're gonna show the jury, you want to make sure that obviously what you say is accurate because, for example, you can get fact checked a little bit later. And the fact that now this has been used as the baseline of this is the product that Amber Heard used to cover her bruises. Okay, we're taking that as true, and then we will move on. So now let's go over to this clip that has been making its rounds on TikTok. I'm going to make sure that this is muted. So we're just not going to listen to the music, but we're just going to watch. And this is by the makeup company. It's Milani Cosmetics. Okay. And as I was saying, you can see there are almost 1 million likes on this. So it's been seen quite a bit. So here we go. What? Carried in her purse for the entire relationship? All right. And then we're pausing to read Milani color correcting and concealer palette. Take note. Alleged abuse was around 2014 through 2016, got divorced in 2016, makeup palette release date December 17th or 2017. Okay, so obviously they're saying that they didn't even release this palette until after the relationship had terminated. So let's keep going. Here we are. Again, confirmed release in 2017. Okay, so that's the clip. So you have the makeup company itself coming out, and is this going to destroy Amber Heard's defense? This isn't good. This really isn't good. And this is something that, her attorney is probably going to need to address at some point, because you better believe that Johnny Depp's attorneys are going in their cross-examination of Amber Heard. They are absolutely going to touch on this, and they're going to go after her credibility and truthfulness, right? All right, here, let's put this back up for you guys. There we go. Okay, so that's a little recap on, so what, potentially, what impact could this have? We know for sure that the attorneys are going to address this on both sides. There is some potential concern. I don't know where you guys kind of land on this situation as far as what side you're on and whether you have been watching this with me, but the witness testimony that we have been hearing has been very interesting because some of it is in person. Okay, so some of it's in person, which just makes it more engaging, right? So you're actually hearing the questions, the answers, you're seeing more of the body movement, and there just seems to be more energy. But then we are also hearing testimony via depositions. And the depositions are basically like interviews that are done prior to that date. And sometimes they'll use video depositions because, these people can't come and testify in person. And so the attorneys get together, they look at the deposition footage, right? The video footage, they agree on what's going to be used, they deal with objections beforehand. So what we actually see during the trial is what has been agreed upon. And that is kind of in lieu of these people appearing in person. And the reason you can do that is because this is a civil trial. Okay. It's not criminal. When you're dealing with criminal trials, then everyone is going to be in person. So let me check over in these comments. All right. We see someone in support of Johnny all day. Yeah, so I know everyone falls on different sides of this. I'm going to do my best to be neutral because I'm all about just the truth. I just want the truth of the matter, the facts, and I know that there's a lot of bias that goes into this. And I think that even in the way that we're kind of seeing some of the cross-examination of Johnny, that, there aren't as many objections and motions to strike. And I think a part of it is just because they're trying to be tactful, not to come off as being rude or aggressive or mean to Johnny, which could be a turnoff to any jurors that might have a little bit of bias and might be fans of Johnny Depp. And so they're trying to be as neutral as possible. So with that being said, let's jump into the opening statements. So, in the opening statements, we heard from both sides and we heard from multiple attorneys for sides. Now, Johnny's attorneys started, and that's because, this is a defamation lawsuit, right? So Depp, he's 58. He's suing Heard for $50 million, and it's a defamation lawsuit. So Johnny Depp is the plaintiff. And he's suing her based on this Washington Post op-ed that she had published in 2018, where she said that she was a survivor of domestic abuse. And even though she didn't specifically name Johnny Depp basically is alleging that everyone knew who you were talking about, right? You've talked about being in an abusive relationship. There's been pictures that have surfaced. People knew. And because of that, I ended up losing, my role in Pirates of the Caribbean for number 6. My career in Hollywood tanked. And it's because of this op-ed that you did. So that's the basis of Johnny's lawsuit against Amber Heard. But then Amber Heard is she's countersuing. So she's countersuing for $100 million against Johnny Depp. And it's also for defamation. And it's for statements that were made as part of a proceeding in the UK, which had to do with suing a magazine. So, the bottom line here is that this is a defamation case. We have suits going against both parties, but in the heart of this, we're talking about domestic abuse. And that's a little bit why we haven't really touched on this until now, because even though I'm fascinated about this trial and I'm following it very closely, we typically get into entertainment type things and, so not so much into really what this is, which is a family law issue. It just so happens to be under the umbrella of defamation. Okay, so back to the opening statements. So for Johnny Depp's opening statements, the first attorney that we heard from was very concise and kind of painted this picture that Amber Heard would be giving the best performance of her life. This was, and as he put it, playing the role of a lifetime. Now, look, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are both actors. And so there's been some speculation out the gate of just, what does this mean? Are we just going to be hearing them acting? Can we even really get to the bottom of this? All right, you guys, I'm just going to see real quick. I see some notes about the screen looking a little weird. Let's see what we can do on our end. Sorry about that. But as far as the opening statements, we heard from the first attorney, very concise, very to the point, and remaining somewhat feeling of just giving information in a neutral kind of way. And then the second attorney that got up, this was a female attorney. Now, you will note that a lot of the, direct examination, the cross-examination is being done by female attorneys. And I think that that is a very tactful thing that they're doing as far as trying to just paint this picture of his team are comprised of women. Johnny Depp does well with women. And that's really a sentiment that you heard in the opening arguments that, Johnny in 50 years has never once been accused of raising a hand to any woman. He has never had these kinds of accusations by anyone. And in fact, Amber Heard, she's not a victim. She's the abuser herself. So I think kind of the general takeaway was that his team did a pretty good job of just painting this as, Johnny Depp is being accused of things that just never happened. And even though, they kind of laid the groundwork and they said, even though there's going to be some colorful language that we're going to hear in communications, in text messages, right? So there were some not so nice things that Johnny Depp did say. That doesn't make him an abuser. That doesn't mean that he abused Amber Heard. So then flipping over, we heard Amber Heard's opening statement from her attorneys. There were two. The first that got up was this guy, and he did a pretty good job, again, of being just very concise. And he's talking about, Depp is an abusive, obsessive ex-husband. He's manipulative, and he's really made, Amber this victim throughout their relationship. And so not to be fooled by what a charismatic person that Johnny Depp is. And I'll tell you what, guys, on that first day, there are a lot of fans in the courtroom, a lot of Johnny's fans in the courtroom. And, you can just kind of see that when everyone is entering into the courtroom and when they're leaving, everyone is just keeping an eye on Johnny. And there's almost like this breath that's taken in when he walks in the room of just this star power that is Johnny Depp. And so what the attorney was really focusing on was just to say, don't let that distract you. Don't let any kind of bias that you have because you love his movies, you like him as an actor, persuade you into thinking that he didn't do these horrible things. Okay, so that was kind of in a nutshell, what the first attorney had said. But then the second attorney that came up, and in fact, here, a little note. I know my show producer is listening to this. I don't know if you want to come in and plug in my battery. It looks like we're about to die. So you're going to do that while I keep talking. So the second attorney comes up, and this is now a woman, and she has very short hair. And it was interesting because while all the other attorneys had like notes and they were going off a very concise script, and they, in some cases, were holding the notes, this attorney, she had some notes in her hand, but she was ad-libbing quite a bit. And she seemed to be going kind of off the cuff, which I think was intended to be, I'm going to connect with the jury. And I want you to know that I know this story well, and I know Amber very well. And, so now I'm going to point out some of these things. All right, there we go. We got some juice. Thank you, that ORKO, saving the day. So, one of the only complaints that I do have about the second attorney for Amber Heard was that she did seem sporadic all over the place, and it was a very aggressive kind of presentation, right? So now when you are defending someone, obviously, and you're saying these are the terrible things that this monster of a person did, of course, there are certain words that you have to use and phrases, but the attorney seemed to be just a little bit all over the place and hard to follow. And so that kind of would be my only complaint, just in that she wasn't terribly likable. And that's a concern that I had as this trial progresses, because guys, all of this matters. What Johnny wears, what Amber wears, what their attorneys wear, what their attorneys say, all of this can impact ultimately how the jury feels about certain things, and it can have an outcome or can impact an outcome. So that's why we are just kind of paying attention to these little nuances of what is happening. All right. And then lastly, one of the points that they did to kind of tie this up was that, we're saying this op-ed that Amber had written was about her being abused, but she was abused when she was younger. And they go, it actually wasn't even about Johnny Depp, but to the extent that the jury would consider this article to be about Johnny Depp, it's not defamation because it was true. And that's why now in the trial, we're seeing so many questions and going back into these, your childhood and drug abuse and what has happened in these different scenarios. Because if we can show that there has been a pattern and that it's more than likely that there has been abuse, then, for example, Amber Heard would be telling the truth. If she's telling the truth, that is the ultimate defense to a defamation claim. And so that means Johnny Depp would lose. And so it goes both ways. And that's why now all the ugly truths, right, as they're arguing, and all the ugliness is coming out from both sides. And we're seeing now pictures of Johnny Depp passed out. We're hearing audio of him vomiting, of him cursing, of Amber, using colorful language. And so we're seeing that, quite frankly, this did look to be a very toxic relationship. But was there abuse? That's the question. All right, so those were the opening statements, and then let's just kind of parse through with the witnesses. Let me take a look at these comments. All right, I see some people coming in and subscribing. Thank you very much for being here. Yeah, there's been a lot happening. So, Dr. Laurel, we heard testimony via deposition, and this was the therapist, Johnny and Amber. Okay, so like a couples therapist. And there were a couple takeaways. Number one, you might be asking, for the doctors that we heard from during this trial, how can we do that? Don't they have certain protections, client, doctor privilege, right? And the answer is you get HIPAA waivers. So you get permission, and likely both sides agreed to this because they want this information to come out. So in the deposition, it took many hours. And so this is kind of what I was saying as far as when you have in-person testimony versus deposition or video deposition testimony, the video stuff can be incredibly boring. And if it's boring for us as viewers, as we're watching, you better believe for the jurors that they're falling asleep. So it can make it a little bit difficult to kind of pay attention. But, one thing that we did hear from the therapist, and the biggest takeaway, was that both Depp and Heard engaged in mutual abuse. Okay, so those were the therapist's words, that they both engaged in mutual abuse. Now, she would kind of describe that, it just seemed that when Johnny would come and be in person with Amber Heard during their sessions, that Johnny was very withdrawn. He was very almost like, the abused child in the relationship. And so he would just kind of shut down. But, he would be much more charismatic and open and vocal when he would do the sessions by himself. And so she really kind of laid this groundwork of their relationship, in that Johnny just seemed to have this tendency with Amber to shut down, to want to leave, to not deal with conflict when it would happen. And then conversely, Amber had this tendency of being kind of aggressive and kind of, overwhelming, we'll say. And so in Impact, the therapist went on and would talk about, it seemed that when Amber would get abusive, and she didn't really clarify what that meant, but in the instances that Amber would get a little abusive, she would do it to prevent Johnny from leaving. So they'd have a fight, Johnny wants to leave, and Amber would do something to provoke a fight to get him to stay. So, for me, the biggest takeaway again was just that there was allegedly mutual abuse. And I think that that does not play well for both sides, right? All right, so moving on, we have Isaac Branch, which is the childhood friend. Now, he was kind of the superstar witness so far, and he seems to be kind of the favorite for a lot of people as far as just being this incredibly charismatic guy. He's from Brooklyn, so he came off very honest, very direct. And just a couple of takeaways from, his direct examination was that, he was friends with Amber, and kind of the scope of the relationship was that this was someone who had been friends with Johnny since they were kids. And, Isaac talked about wanting to be a full-time painter, not being able to afford it. And what a great guy Johnny was, because, Johnny would essentially pay for Isaac to paint and him up in a suite, and paid all of his living expenses. It was pretty amazing. All right, real quick, guys, I'm getting a note to refresh. I'm going to refresh really fast. I don't know if this is going to impact, but I'm just going to refresh and we'll see what happens. All right, here we go. Coming back in. Hopefully that gives you a little bit cleaner. I know we had plugged in with the Wi-Fi. All right, here we go. Perfect. So anyway, Johnny, I guess in a way that kind of makes this guy seem a little biased, right? So wouldn't the obvious questions just be, well, don't you owe Johnny a lot? Johnny has paid for you to live, to be a full-time artist. What an amazing thing. And that's probably where the attorneys for Amber Heard should have gone with their cross-examination. But, in the direct examination, everything went well. Isaac is getting the jury to laugh. I mean, he just, again, just comes off of a very honest, likable guy. So then Amber Heard's attorneys get up and they're doing their cross examination. And, quite frankly, it didn't go very well for the attorneys, because as the attorney is continuing to push and just to try to elicit these responses from Isaac, he just was basically not taking any of their shit. And so, when they would challenge him on, well, how would you possibly know if she was wearing makeup? Because something he continued to reiterate in his testimony was that he never saw makeup on Amber. And he never saw bruises, and he never saw swelling, and he never saw red marks. And he would see her because they all lived in this building. So as they would come and go, he'd run into her. And so he would describe the instances of running into her. What was she doing? And so the attorney tried to say, well, how do you possibly know when someone's wearing makeup? And he was just truthful. And he said, well, I suppose I don't, but I think I do. And I don't think that she was wearing makeup, and I didn't see any swelling. And then kind of the key moment where this really went so bad for Amber Heard's attorney was when they opened the door and they said, aren't you, something to the effect of, aren't you mad at Amber? Aren't you still angry at Amber? And I think the point was just trying to show that Isaac is biased and he's just doing this because he's angry at her. And boy, did they open the floodgates, because Isaac gets to answer. So then he went off on this rant for several minutes where he basically said everything that Johnny Depp's team would have wanted him to say. Amber Heard's a liar. She's malicious. She's just trying to hurt Johnny. And so having those words come from a key witness and in the course of examination and cross-examination from Amber's attorney, not even from Johnny's attorney, was pretty powerful stuff. So, in my opinion, I think that as this cross-examination was going on, I think that the attorney should have cut their losses, just focused on, maybe some bias. Don't you owe Johnny a lot? He's done so much for you. And just leave it at that, because Isaac was a really good witness. Okay, and then we had a little ouch moment for Johnny's team. So Gina Deuters, so this was another friend of Johnny's, and she initially in her testimony she was talking about, I saw Johnny taking drugs, I saw Johnny drinking, but he has this demeanor that's quite laid back, and he wouldn't get aggressive, and he wouldn't get violent, right? So she was testifying to the fact that even in his worst states, he's not an aggressive or abusive guy, basically. So it was pretty good, testimony until you see. I'm getting a question if I need some water. I'm okay. I got a little water. Thank you very much. So in the line of questioning, you see Amber Heard's attorneys. They're kind of whispering. They're whispering towards each other. Amber's whispering, and you don't know what's happening. But then they ask for a sidebar with the judge. So they go up to the the front. We're not allowed to hear what's happening, which is just awful. I want to hear everything that is happening in this trial. But in any case, then the judge turns to Gina and she asks, have you seen any portion of this trial online? And Gina just answers truthfully. She's like, I think I've seen some clips on social media. And the judge goes, so you've seen witness testimony, you've seen clips of the trial. Gina says yes. And immediately the judge says, you're excused. And she strikes, which means that, essentially all of the record has to be removed from the record of Gina's testimony. It cannot be considered. And, it's because you're not supposed to hear anything that is happening as a witness, as a juror. And so that was, I don't know whose fault that was, as far as maybe someone didn't tell her on Johnny's team, but that just means that all of that testimony was thrown out. There was another little episode. So I guess Eve Barlow, I believe she's Amber Heard's current girlfriend. So she was thrown out of the courtroom and asked not to come back in. It had to do with some tweeting that had happened during the trial. So guys, the way it works, you can see phones in courtrooms, and it's usually the attorneys, right? So we might have our phones when we are checking dates, with the court and things like that. But other than that, the court doesn't want any phones in the courtroom. And a lot of it has to do, particularly in this case, with protecting the privacy of the jury, right? We don't want pictures of the jury being leaked. So it had come out that apparently the girlfriend had been tweeting from the courtroom. And so there were a couple other things leading up to that. But the point just being she was asked to leave and she is not allowed to return for the remainder of the trial. All right, let's go over to the comments section before we get on to the next witness. He kissed her cheek. It doesn't matter what makeup you use. You can't pass the cheek test. You either feel it, taste it on your lips, or smell it. He is an artist. I would trust his eyes. Okay, so right, we're talking about Isaac, right? So Isaac, who had run into Amber Heard on multiple occasions. That's what he had testified to. And just saying, I believe that she wasn't wearing makeup. She didn't wear makeup a lot. And as we're watching the trial, I am noticing how Amber is dressing, how she's doing her hair. But the fact that she does seem to have very minimalistic makeup, which kind of could go for both arguments. Maybe she wears very light makeup in general, right? You're not seeing like deep eyeshadow and deep lipstick. So that could play either way, but I think that's a good point. I think if someone is literally kissing you on your face to say hello, which is what Isaac said that he did, being from Brooklyn, that maybe he would know. And something that stood out in one of the questions was, so how did you kiss her? And, was it like a mwah, mwah, or was it like a mwah? And, so then he kind of mimicked what it was. You could tell he kind of felt a little bit silly, but he just goes, no, it's just the one. He goes, I think it was something like, I'm not French. I don't kiss both sides, which kind of made, the courtroom chuckle for a moment. So again, just going back to how likable Isaac was in his not only direct examination, but also on the cross. Yeah, I mean, guys, especially on Court TV Live, if you're watching through that platform, they are muting the audio from time to time as we are listening to the audio, as we are watching some of the clips, because there was, in fact, very colorful language used. And, and that's tough. I think for anyone to, kind of hear and to try to keep separate of something that you'll say. And Johnny testified to this, right? We'll get into Johnny's testimony here, but I'll just jump into it right now. As far as he testified to, you saying something in heat of a moment in a text message is far different from being in front of someone and actually raising your hand to them. And while I think that he didn't take as much ownership over his words, maybe as he should have, as far as just being kind of direct. Nonetheless, I think that that's a fair argument because they're two different things. You can send hideous text and abuse someone. You can send hideous text and not abuse someone. Those are two different things. What? Because he slammed some cabinets after his mom died, and also finding out 650 million was stolen from him and illegally recorded. All right, so it wasn't Friday because they only have 4 days of courts. This would have been on Thursday. So in his last couple of hours of the cross examination, they were going through this instance where Amber Heard had set up her phone and she was privately recording him or unknowingly recording him. And so you see footage of Johnny, he seems to be very elevated, right? And so he's kind of slamming some things here and there. He's drinking something. He testified, in his cross examination that it was alcohol, but to your point, does slamming some cabinets, acting aggressive, constitute abuse? And, and I think Johnny's kind of point on this when he was asked the question, he just goes, how would you feel if someone was, as he said, illegally recording you? And kind of like, wouldn't you be upset as well? Okay, so let's keep going. Here's another one. Both had admitted to drugs and booze and keeping extra Xanax in his pocket. All right, guys. So actually, to that point, let's go on. So we heard from David Kipper as well as the nurse. So I'm just going to give you a couple of points here. So we heard from the Beverly Hills-based physician. He talked about Johnny being fearful of stopping the opiates that he had been taking. Okay, so Johnny was very direct in that he just said, yes, I was absolutely on opiates. And it came to this point where I wasn't even doing it to get high. I was doing it because of the drug. Now, something interesting was that we didn't hear objections from Amber Heard's attorneys while Johnny Depp was giving kind of this medical breakdown of like what it's like to be addicted to something and what symptoms you go through when you're starting to go through withdrawals. And he's not qualified to make those kinds of statements. And so those should have drawn objections. But that goes to kind of what I was saying at the beginning of the live stream. Is some of this tactfully being kind of held back because the attorneys don't want to come off as overly aggressive and trying to silence Johnny? So they're just letting him say what he wants to say. And maybe they're going to deal with it later on. I don't know, but those were a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. So other than just saying, he had to kind of time when he went into not a detox, but it was like a detox, right? So, it wasn't like a sober living that he went to for 6 months, but that he needed to get clean. And so they had planned this time that he was going to do it with the assistance of not only Dr. Kipper, but also Debbie Lloyd, who's a registered nurse. And so they were going to travel to this island and have some time to, get Depp through this process and give him medications to deal with the withdrawals. So the nurse, in her video deposition, she talked about a lot of different things, but she talks about different incidents where there was a fall and Depp appeared increasingly stressed and he seemed to be aggravated by Amber Heard. And she kind of reinforced this sentiment that we're hearing from the witnesses that this relationship seemed to just be progressively getting more and more toxic. Okay, so very interesting stuff. Now, let's get into a little bit of Johnny Depp. So the first piece of what we heard from Johnny Depp is the direct examination. So that means that his attorneys are going to ask him questions. Now, a lot of the questions are going to be very open-ended. So that means that they're just going to be things like, tell me about your childhood. Tell me about how you got into acting, for example. Now, one thing that, I felt like as far as Johnny's presentation of his story was that it was very slow and methodical. And I saw some people just commenting that it was mind-numbingly boring. Okay. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but it definitely, he was taking a lot of time to kind of get to certain points. And so I don't know as far as whether his attorneys were helping to kind of move things along because he had a lot of things that he needed to say and share. So, for example, some of the things that we did hear about was his abusive childhood. Okay. And we had heard a little bit about this when his sister testified, Christy. And so they testified about things like when, they were young, their mom would call Christy Violet. And Violet was the name of a family member that the mom hated. And so, the daughter knew that when the mom called her Violet, it wasn't just like, oh, oops, I called you the wrong name. It was actually meaning to be scornful and kind of hateful. And then the nickname that she had for Johnny, I believe, was One Eye. And that was because Johnny kind of had this lazy eye. And he had to wear like an eye patch for a little while to cover the good eye so it could work his more lazy eye and get it, strong. And, so they talked about not only kind of the verbal, emotional abuse that they went through as kids, but also the physical abuse and what it was like in that household. And, I think the purpose of kind of laying that groundwork, because you might be thinking, why is that relevant to anything? Well, the purpose of laying that groundwork is to basically show that in the way that Johnny described this relationship with his mother and what he saw from his father, who became very passive and who would not punch back and who would not push back and would just kind of take the abuse in the same kind of way that's a pattern that Johnny has followed in his adult life. And so, Johnny's experience with abuse himself, but then also that correlation to the personality types, I think is the picture that they're trying to paint for the jury. But then also just to say that, Johnny is the victim of abuse. Now, we haven't heard from Amber Heard's side yet as far as her testimony. My understanding is that she is going to testify that she is also the victim of abuse when she was a child. I think that goes into potentially how these people, when they were together, how they played off each other, how they potentially became very toxic to each other in their relationship. But from Johnny Depp, he got into discussing being addicted to Roxy. Okay. So being addicted basically to, as he described it, it's like a painkiller, but it doesn't really have the painkiller aspect. It's just the high portion. And so then he got into, like I was saying, the symptoms and what it was like when, he wasn't able to have another dosing and that he would get the shakes and that, he would just feel like all kinds of things. Was he going to have a seizure? Was he going to have a heart attack? And this was what he was testifying to. So, while he was talking about, I have been through a detox, I kicked it, I've been basically clean ever since. Um, you know, and one of the questions that I thought was very important was, did this all happen while you're in the relationship with Amber? Because I think what Amber's attorneys are trying to lay the groundwork for is to say that Johnny maybe was so high and so drunk that he had no idea that he was abusing Amber. Okay. And what I think some of the other witness testimony that we're hearing was trying to get to is just to say that even though, he has used lots of recreational drugs, he does drink, that, this is something that has not turned him into an abusive person because that's just not who he is. And in fact, in his testimony, he talked a lot about how, in fact, Amber's the one that is abusive. He talked about the fact that they would have confrontations where she was trying to stop him from leaving and she would get in his face and she would punch him in his face and he would try to restrain her and he would try to, create space and leave. And so, like I said, as far as the position of Johnny Depp and his attorneys is that Amber Heard is the aggressor. And she's using this as an opportunity, of course, whether you're just, take it as she's going for money or she told a lie in the beginning and now she's doubling down. Now, this is one side of the story. So we left off on Thursday in the middle of Johnny Depp's cross examination, and tomorrow morning they will resume and be back with that cross examination. I think Johnny is probably going to end up being on that stand for another day or two, if not more. And then the trial will continue. But there are two sides. And so far, we've been hearing Johnny's side of the story from his witnesses to his testimony, but there's going to be a whole other list of witnesses and Amber's testimony that we're going to hear. Let's go back into the comments. The fact that she's been able to work as much as she wants and he's been fired by everything really sucks. Yeah, so he talked about his acting career quite a bit. And he talked about the fact that he was originally a musician and he got into acting kind of by not mistake, but just as a quick side job that was offered to him. And then it led to another thing that ended up becoming very successful, and he was just like, I couldn't go back after that. I couldn't kind of take a step down to being a musician again after being on a successful, I think it was a TV show at that time. And then just going through some of the films that he had started and talking about, being the character of Captain Jack Sparrow and how he really was quintessential, I think the word is, for that part, and that he came in and rewrote it. And he wrote that character and the feeling and the emotion, and and to the extent that it was a success, that it was because of him. So I thought it was interesting as they kind of went through the different films, and then just to say, well, look, on that cross examination, you didn't get picked up for Pirates of the Caribbean #6. It's your claim today that that's because Amber Heard wrote this op-ed that then destroyed your career. But wasn't it because you were late to set? But wasn't it because you were taking drugs and you were hung over and the producers were, quite frankly, just done with you? And Johnny's response to that was, no, not at all. While, maybe I would have been late to set a couple of times, they're still using my face in all their theme parks. They haven't removed me to the extent that they want to distance themselves from me. They haven't removed me from anything other than being involved in Pirates of the Caribbean #6. And I think it was just because Amber put out this article. I have now been framed as this wife beater. And so they just want to distance themselves from me. And obviously, there are some other films that Johnny was, there was one that he was dropped from. And, he is alleging that his career has basically plummeted following this article. So that's the basis of him seeking $50 million as part of his defamation claim. But, like I said, there is a lot that goes into this, even though it's a defamation claim. It really is a family law case of domestic violence, or at least, well, that's what both sides are alleging. Some people just can't live together when one partner or the other is in recovery. That's take priority over everything else. Yeah, I mean, so going back to the point of, if Johnny was going and detoxing and Amber was with him and experiencing this, that can't be a pleasant experience for anybody, right? For a significant other. But does that amount to someone being so miserable in their detox that they're now abusing you? Now, obviously, the detox was a short period of time. Amber Heard is, in fact, alleging that the abuse took place for the entirety of the relationship. And that goes back to the makeup palette. We started showing the testimony from her attorney and those opening statements, showing the clip from TikTok from the makeup company itself, and that the makeup company is now claiming that their product was not even in distribution, could not have even been purchased at the time, after they had broken up. So I think that all kind of plays into it, but that's why these issues are being hyper focused on in the examination, in the cross-examination, and with the exhibits. I mean, you're hearing that they're at like exhibit 500, exhibit 700. There is an incredible amount of paper and audio and video for them to cover. And that's why this is now, I believe, a 7-week trial. So we're kind of recapping on 2 weeks of trial that we've heard. And these are 4-day weeks because the court takes Fridays to deal with, motions and things like that. So there's been a lot jam-packed, but that's why these trials end up being so long, because especially in a case like this, there's a lot that they have to cover and there's procedure that you need to deal with in order to get these things into evidence, to get them published to the jury. And we're seeing that procedure. Johnny Depp is getting fired because they realize he ruins movies. He doesn't bring in money for studios. Okay, so we're going to hear that from Amber Heard's side. They're going to say that his career was already tanking, that he was through the prime, if you want to call it that, of his career. And there just happened to be a coincidence that she had published an article and, quite frankly, no one really cared about it. Now, if you guys remember, Johnny Depp has already kind of dealt with this issue, right? Across the pond, as they say, in the UK. And there was a magazine that had published on the front cover saying that Johnny Depp was a wife beater. So he already went through this process a couple years ago. He did not win in that case. And then he brought it here. And now we're dealing with this in the United States. And, he said it during his testimony of how his attorney asked him, how has this damaged you? And he just said, basically, how has this not damaged me? I will never recover from this allegation, even if I win. And that's true. And I think that's why that, there's a lot of weight put into these cases that sometimes, at the front end might just seem retaliatory, right? You heard the therapist saying they're basically abusing each other. So are these two entitled Hollywood actors that were in an incredibly toxic relationship and now they're countersuing each other for these very large sums of money because they've been publicly humiliated? Well, it certainly doesn't help any of that now that we are having all of these pictures, all this audio, all this video release. I mean, we saw pictures of feces, right? So there was a whole line of questions about the fact over this picture that there was feces on a bed and questioning, where did it come from? Was it from Johnny? Was it from Amber? And so the fact that that's where that this has gone is a big deal. But we also heard issues of Johnny's finger getting cut off. Now, when I heard about this finger injury, I initially thought that maybe he had suffered some kind of cut, but apparently the tip of his finger, and I believe it's his middle finger, the tip of his finger was completely severed from his hand. And we have two different stories about what happened, which I'm going to get into. Indeed. We'll see about that. All right, so what we're hearing from Johnny Depp's side is that Amber Heard essentially chucked glass at him, and I think it was a shot glass. So she, in a fight, she chucks the glass at him, and that it, lacerated his finger, it cut off his finger. Now, in some of the testimony we're hearing from the doctors, right, when he went to the ER, the story that he told was that he had cut it off himself, right? It was just like, oops, accident. And in Johnny's testimony, he was saying, no, that's not true. I was trying to protect Amber. We were trying to keep our very toxic relationship on the down low. And so, yes, that was my statement, but it wasn't the truth. I'm telling you the truth now. And then he talked about, obviously, the pain, the fact that he doesn't have any feeling in that finger. I can't imagine what that feels like or doesn't feel like. But what we will be hearing from Amber's side is that Johnny did this to himself. Okay. And, as we're kind of hearing things about Johnny being very over the top when he was angry, when he was enraged, and writing on walls and writing on counters, which I think, to a degree, Johnny has admitted. But again, we go back to, well, is kind of losing it because maybe you are drunk or angry and writing profanity on walls. Is that the same as not only abusing someone, but sexual assault, which is another big piece that just kind of, threw everyone for a loop when this first started because, Amber had never brought up these sexual assault allegations. And then in these opening statements, we're hearing about some very heinous things that Johnny Depp allegedly did to her. Not only once, but multiple times and over an extended period of time. A bizarre way to get revenge, indeed. Guys, I do a litigation, and as a litigation attorney, there's a lot of emotion that goes into the decision to sue and to keep going. And that goes back to, is Amber Heard, did she just tell a lie at the beginning of this? And now this has snowballed completely out of control, right? So now she has to really go above and beyond to compound the lies. Okay, so that's one side. But then on the other side of it, was Amber suffering in silence? Right. And so finally there was that straw that broke the camel's back. And even though they tried settling, there were things that then happened that has now forced her into the limelight. And so now she needs to kind of have her day in court and she needs to get justice. And it's very tough because everything that we're seeing is making it gray, right? So the goal here is to say, was it true or was it a lie? Because if it was true, then the defamation claim cannot stand because it's true. But when you're hearing stuff about things getting broken and smashed, and there's drug abuse and there's alcohol, and are people blacking out? And so they don't even know what they're doing. It makes it a little bit difficult for the jury, but that's why we have these trials. That's why we go through all of this. I reviewed info on the writing on the wall. It's interesting. They were supposed to be taken one right after the other at different angles, but the pictures changed. I don't know if you guys saw this one picture of Johnny Depp. He looked, as they called it, passed out. And so his head's kind of back. He has a hand in his pocket, and then in the other hand, he's holding what was later described as ice cream. And so in cross examination, the attorney was saying, you know, weren't you passed out because you were, and I think it was, were you high or were you drunk? And Johnny's response to that was, well, I was nodding off because I had my Roxy, right? The opiates, and the opiates are a downer. So I was already kind of nodding off, and Miss Heard set this up. And she gave me the ice cream to hold so she could take this picture. So Johnny, in his way, is also trying to create this perception that, Amber is creating this narrative. And even in the video showing Johnny acting very drunk, acting very aggressive, he is drinking, but pointing out the fact that she's trying to hide her phone, she's trying to hide that she's taping him. She's taking pictures of him while she knows that he's nodding off. So is she just trying to construct this elaborate story, or conversely, is she just trying to tell her side of this story and that these things really were happening and she decided at some point to start documenting it? If you're abused, you don't record secretly. When the abuser is upset, you don't follow said abuser into another room and smile in that same room. Johnny Depp did make that point when he was being cross-examined. He said, to the extent that she was so intimidated and scared, I don't quite understand why she'd be trying to secretly videotape me. I don't know how that went over with the jury, but that was the point that he made when asked about that footage. She's claimed Johnny has threatened her, saying, nobody will believe her about the abuse. He is just too important. Well, I mean, let's take for a moment that Amber is telling the truth. There is a strong support for Johnny Depp, no matter where you are on social media, no matter where you are in the world, and people absolutely love him. He has touched their lives for so many decades and so many films. And so there's a feeling of a close personal connection with Johnny Depp. And even in, the actual trial room, every day, the majority of the audience in the room are Johnny Depp fans, and they wait outside, and I'm sure there are fans in there for Amber Heard as well. But I do feel like in the court of public perception and public opinion, that the scale is much more weighted towards Johnny Depp. But that's also why, for example, I was kind of curious when I saw this cosmetic TikTok that was going insanely viral, right? So Amber Heard, the concealer, this is what she used to cover her bruises. The company comes out and says, we didn't even make that product until after their relationship. They're going to have to deal with this, but the jury's not supposed to see any of that stuff. The jury is not supposed to be on social media, not supposed to be talking to friends or family, but this has to come out. And it's going to come out from the attorneys who are going to address this. And in one instance, they're going to try to, on Johnny's team, do this to impeach Amber's testimony. And they don't need to even disclose it ahead of time. When you're using evidence for impeachment purposes, you can kind of have it in your back pocket, and then they will go ahead and ask her about it. And so, I'm sure her attorneys are going to get wind of this. And so, hopefully they will prepare her for whatever her answer needs to be. But when that moment comes, I'm going to be watching. She's not scared of him. As far as any little movement that Johnny is making is being hyper focused on, and I'm seeing like these clips and compilations after the fact, any little, smirk or smile or laugh. And in the same kind of way, there's a lot of examination of Amber's body movements and her expressions. And both of them, I think, are trying to remain very neutral, which is important. It's not good for Johnny if he seems that he's not taking this seriously, or if he's laughing and smirking. And, quite frankly, one of the takeaways that I had after watching some of his cross examination is that he did get a little cheeky a couple times. Now, I think it played well for his fans, right? Because, he was kind of talking about objections and hearsay and just, not being silly, but being cheeky, being a little bit sassy here and there, which, that's what happens when you have someone for hours and hours, you know, going over and over and over with questions and essentially, calling you a liar and your abuser. Of course, you're going to feel angry and you're going to start to have these emotions, but you can't express them. It's incredibly important. And so the moments that he was getting a little bit cheeky, I thought, oh, that's probably not the best thing for, how it's coming off to the jurors. But that was just my opinion. I know that those exact same moments have been cut together into these compilations that are going viral, and people find them very, very funny. An addict, yes. He is an abuser, no. She picked at him and the demon she knew he had. She used him. We have a pretty big age discrepancy as well. Johnny Depp's coming up on 60, Amber Heard 35. There's a lot of talk about jealousy and the fact that Johnny was very jealous on, she would go off to do her projects. And there was cross examination about an instance where there was, a woman who was kind of inebriated and she was putting her hand on Amber. And then, Johnny had removed the hand or threw the hand. So there was a little back and forth on, what he had done. And then he yelled at her. And then Amber and Johnny went and had a big fight. So there's a lot of back and forth on, was he overreacting or was he acting like any man would? And look, that's something that we heard from Johnny Depp a couple of times, as far as I'm only human. And, to the instance that I do get drunk or I do get aggressive or I do get angry, that doesn't make me an abuser. And I am human. So guys, that's where we left off. We have this, I don't know how they're going to handle this makeup issue. Oh my goodness. But as far as where we're at, we're 2 weeks now into this trial. We have heard testimony from doctors and friends, and the sister of Johnny Depp and from Johnny Depp himself. He is still on cross-examination. We're going to pick that up tomorrow. We're going to be hearing from him. And so if you guys like this, I'll definitely follow this and we'll check in again once we have a little bit more of Johnny Depp's cross-examination, of course, when we hear from Amber as well. So guys, I appreciate you staying on with me and being here. I'm top music attorney, Miss Crystal. Make sure you come say hi on social media. I'm at Top Music Attorney on all social media platforms. And I'm so excited because Top Music Attorney on TikTok and Instagram, you guys have been blowing up my videos. Like, I'm so excited and I love your faces so much. So in any case, if you're new here, please subscribe, turn on those bell notifications so you don't miss any videos from your new favorite red/brunette attorney. And I'll see you guys on the next one. I'm Miss Crystal. Bye.